I don't know about you guys, but for me, Gears of War eday really stole the show during Summer Game Fest for me, especially for the parts of Xbox presentations. So, with the trailer showing us an awesome cinematic piece with all in-game assets and not CG, we also got some amazing interviews and articles after the fact with Matt Cersei and Nicole Fawcett, some leads over throughout the coalition. And they give us some amazing information about the game that we can't really get anywhere else as of right now. And they also tell us of what we can expect for the multiplayer for Gears of War eday in this article right here. So big shout out to Windows Central for that as well. Today we're going to be covering just the multiplayer stuff that we can be expecting, but we're going to be breaking down this article even deeper in later videos. So if that interests you and you want to keep up to date with anything Gears of War eday, definitely make sure to like this video so I know you guys are liking the content, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any further news for the game. Also, if we can hit a total of 50 likes, we will definitely be covering the game further as it gets closer. So from here, we're really just going to dive into the article in this section right here, as it does talk about the multiplayer, and we're going to go ahead and read it just word for word here. And this is the interviewer himself talking, saying, "One question I got a lot of on social media this past week was, will Gears of War eday have multiplayer? I personally found the question surprising, but we do live in weird times of subverted expectations. Every single Gears of War has competitive multiplayer in some form, and more often than not, a PvE multiplayer mode in Horde. Still, I sneakily asked Matt Cersei if players can once again expect Gears' frenetic multiplayer combat to return. He said sneakily because the team really weren't ready to get deeper into the weeds on gameplay modes and things like that, but Matt did have some reassurances for those concerned. Matt Cersei says, "I would say this is the next mainline Gears game," Cersei emphasized. "Gears has a pretty clear DNA for gameplay modes, so you could probably anticipate where we'll be going with eday." And on this front, when we go ahead and look at what was in something like Gears 5, they had Horde mode, the more new Escape mode, Execution, Escalation, Guardian, Team Deathmatch, King of the Hill, going against bots, the usual suspects in line for Gears of War multiplayer modes. He continues to say, "Indeed, there are some things about Gears that will never change, like competitive multiplayer, but I was also curious how eday will subvert expectations. It's true that we've never experienced eday itself, but fighting Locust in a crumbling city does at least sound pretty familiar. If you go back from Gears of War 1 all the way to Gears of War 5, you always have some sort of dilapidated city or ruin setting, so it does sound pretty familiar for those familiar with the franchise." He asked Matt and Nicole how they'd find ways to bring something new while also heading into the past. They say, "I agree. There's a lot of stuff we can do. On the story, there's a 14-year gap between edays and Gears of War 1. Even Gears Tactics was a few years into the war. eday isn't a world that's destroyed, it's beautiful, with people who are in a time of peace. We see the Locusts introduced through the eyes of the people who have never seen them before and don't have any idea of what's going on," Matt explained. "We're also going to change up gameplay stuff as well, which is crucial and a huge point. They're going to be changing gameplay mechanics in one way, shape, or form, although we have no idea as of how yet. We've worked on the franchise for 10 years, so we've got experience with revisiting enemy types, so bringing back some older enemy types that have kind of dwindled out, but also adding new weapons and maybe even new enemies as well. We'll do all that stuff." So when it comes to revisiting old enemies, I kind of took it upon myself to go ahead and visit the Reddit page for Gears of War. And one of the things that people really complained about for Gears 4 and 5 was that you didn't get a lot of those older enemies kind of bleeding through or getting iterations even for something like Horde mode in the later versions of Gears. They said they missed stuff like the Blood Mounts, Maulers, Cantus, Boomers, Scion versions of them, and even Theron guards and Lambent, which I'm surprised haven't been in the Horde mode at least to give us some sort of callback to the golden days, right? So they can definitely go ahead and do something like that when it comes to revisiting enemies. Something else they briefly touch on in the topic here of revisiting enemies is that the interviewer asked them, "Is Ram going to show up?" And they say, "We're not really answering story questions right now," and then they exchange a couple smirks back and forth. Now, this is super interesting. So not only will we get high graphic fidelity versions of these older enemies, but we might even get some old boss enemies or sub-boss enemies throughout the series, coming back and reimagined in Unreal Engine 5 in Gears of War eday. Maybe they get shown off a little bit just through a scene passing by, or you go ahead and hear them by name called out in the story. When it comes to going ahead and adding new weapons or maybe even adding new enemies as well, they always have to be a little bit careful with that, right? They don't want to be breaking continuity and have a weapon show up here that's not showing up in Gears of War 1 all the way to Gears of War 5, right? So really the only thing I can see happening for weapons is that we kind of get some bootleg or downgraded versions of the guns and weapons we know now. So instead of having like the pistol that we know now, maybe we have a different version that just wasn't as good, and that's the new weapon that's introduced. Or it could be the same thing for the shotgun. Maybe it's not the Nasher shotgun, and it was like the Mauler, and it just wasn't as good as it used to be, but they balance it in a way where it's not super broken, it's not super useless, somewhere in between, but just a little less effective than the guns that they use from Gears 1 onwards. And when it comes to enemy types, I think there's one way they can really introduce maybe one new type of enemy. And that would be like, okay, maybe there was an enemy type that was like a grunt unit that was introduced in eday at the beginning of the war, but they found its nest kind of something like they do similar throughout the Gears franchise, and they kind of take them all out with something like the Hammer of Dawn, and that's why that enemy type is gone and doesn't show up from Gears 1 onwards as well. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but this is some ways that I could definitely see some new weapons or some new enemies being added. Like adding on to the new weapons, I know one of the ways is we're gonna see a event that really inspires the Mark II Lancer, right? So what if they have a makeshift sort of weapon that is like these weapons but just not as good because it's just made from scavenger parts across the city when they're trying to fend off all these locust threats? But enough of the tangents. So far, from these developers at the Coalition themselves, we've got 4 things that are coming up that could be added into the multiplayer and just the game overall in Gears eday. We have gameplay stuff happening. I don't know if this is going to be changes to something like their roles, the reload mechanic, what have you. I have no idea, but it is a little bit frightening, I'm not gonna lie, but hopefully they can weave it into Gears in a way where it just seems natural, like it was always there. That way there's no one really saying, the gameplay feels rough, they should have just stuck to what was there before, and that it just feels good, right? They're also toying revisiting old enemy types that we haven't seen in a while, adding new weapons and enemies as well for something not only like the campaign, but something like Horde mode and hopefully Beast mode as well, which is something that I'm personally hoping for. I love the Beast mode, and I hope that they actually bring it back for Gears of War eday. It was one of my favorite things. Horde mode and Beast mode really just kind of harken me back to something like Call of Duty Zombies or Left 4 Dead, right? Obviously Left 4 Dead being Beast mode and Horde mode being Call of Duty Zombies. And I really love that this game has its own sort of version of this mashup that you can go ahead and kind of play all in one package with Gears of War on top of its awesome, chaotic, and gory multiplayer. For more info on specifics, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see when they're closer to reveal and ready to reveal some more details, but for now, I think this is pretty good, all things considered. And in future videos, we are going to be breaking down this article even further from Windows Central. The full article is going to be linked down below if you want to go ahead and read that for yourself. But I do have a couple videos planned in the future for Gears of War, including some things that they've revealed about the story so far, the timeline that we're going to be taking the events in, not just eday, but we're going to be going a little bit further in, and their direction for the story that they're taking moving forward. There is a lot of potential for edays to kind of uproot the game and put it back to its roots that it used to have before, right? But we're just going to have to wait and see how this game plays out, and when the gameplay officially gets revealed, what something like the new gameplay mechanics could be. So if you're excited for Gears of War, guys, don't forget to like it up. 50 likes and we'll definitely be continuing coverage, and of course subscribe for all things Gears of War, other AAA titles as well, along with playthroughs and edited hilarious content. And with that, guys, all I have to say is thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you guys next time. Peace!